Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of The Snake Pit. I'm your host, Son of Bat, and it's been a good minute since I uploaded anything on this channel. For everyone who stuck around or any new subscribers, thank you for your support. It truly means a lot and is honestly the main reason why I keep making these videos. Basically, all winter and into the early parts of spring, I've been both reviewing films and posting them on Letterboxd, while also driving myself mad with so-called conspiracies and the Epstein file dump that was released. I know it's probably not good for my mental health, but I've been diving deep into the abyss of conspiracies for almost 15 years, and what started out as a simple Google search during a weed-induced trip quickly spiraled into an expose of carnage and barbarism that's been repeatedly planned and perpetrated by the highest levels of society, seemingly since the dawn of time. With stories so horrific and grotesque that it seems like it's ripped right out of the pages from the works of the Marquis de Sade or a trashy horror flick. I remember always being into unexplained mysteries and cryptids when I was a child, but around the age of 14, all these stories started to sound fantastical, or in the case of alien conspiracies, a mix of bullshit and government disinformation. I was becoming more interested in true crime and simultaneously bored with what I perceived as surface-level conspiracies. I wanted to find something, more down-to-earth and realistic, I guess. So I'm sitting there in the middle of a bong hit and the light goes off in my brain. Are there any serial killer or cult conspiracies? After I cleared my hit, I quickly went on the computer and decided to do some digging. The first result that came up was a group called the 4-Pi Movement, which is an offshoot of the Process Church of the Final Judgment. Online, it explained that the 4-Pi Movement was supposedly a satanic offshoot and cult responsible for the Son of Sam murders and the production of snuff films in the late 1970s. I immediately was hooked and decided to keep digging. What I eventually found was a rabbit hole containing topics such as mind control, false flag operations, government corruption, extortion, human trafficking, murder, and a strong connection to Satanism and the occult. I remember watching every video I could find and reading every article on the web until my whole understanding of the world was completely reshaped. It was like the blinds were forcibly ripped off my eyes, so every ugly truth was no longer hidden. Everything started to connect, and suddenly it became almost overwhelming. I never had faith or trusted in the government, but I could never understand why. At first I thought it was because that's what all young people did as an act of defiance against authority, but it's almost like the older I got, the more distrustful I became. Looking back now, I think it was instinctive. I compare it to the internal alarm that goes off when humans are around predators. I remember feeling like I had to warn everybody about what was going on, so I would just tell anybody and everybody who would listen. I remember people I considered friends and even my family distancing themselves from me, and it was truly infuriating because in many cases I had the receipts to back up what I was saying. When Pizzagate first broke, I thought for sure that now people would stop and actually examine all these leads and theories, but instead it got co-opted by the right and denounced by the left, creating a sort of satanic panic 2.0. At this point, anyone who thought I was gone mentally probably now thought of me as a fringe extremist. It wasn't until 2019, with the supposed suicide of Jeffrey Epstein, that people finally decided to take these claims more seriously and investigate these seemingly endless rabbit holes. By this time, all the information that was readily available was now taken off sites like YouTube or pushed so far down the algorithm that it became borderline impossible to find. You can imagine how frustrating this was when I was, trying to show people videos of the shit that I was finding, only for them to, either be deleted or just way, way off somewhere into the fucking void that is YouTube. It was honestly a fucking trip. Whole channels disappeared and web links became dead ends. To add on to the idea of a satanic panic 2.0, almost all these original videos were re-uploaded to sites with extreme controversy like BitChute, further pushing the narrative that this was all just an alt-right fantasy. The reality is that all sides of the government have been implicated and the whole system is truly corrupted. The entertainment we consume is either rage bait or slop just built to keep the division going, and the corporations who create these products and programming are the real masters of the country. This goes beyond left or right and has been chipping away at our humanity for centuries. It's a disease that only seems to grow stronger as time goes on. It truly is an abhorrent evil that holds our system in its grip, continuously squeezing the life out of it. In making this video, I had no idea what to specifically talk about, so in the end I decided to give a sort of rundown on some of the more terrifying topics and discoveries. So why don't we just rip the band-aid off and talk about a link that shows up in these theories time and time again. Of course I'm talking about Baal and Moloch. Now this is a topic I find pretty difficult to explain because the definitions seem to either conflict or overlap with each other, but the basic gist of it is this. Both are deities that seem to have a connection with cult worship and child sacrifice. However, when looking up definitions, the waters become murky and confusing. One definition goes as follows. Baal is a Canaanite usurper, god/demon, whose cults are constantly creating problems for God's people in the Old Testament. They lure Israelites into demon worship and sexual depravity, with prime examples being the Baal Peor incident, Jezebel, and Baal Worship at Dan. There are lots of Baals which may be local instantations of a certain rebel spiritual power or independent entities. Moloch, though, is more mysterious. Moloch, on the other hand, is another supernatural deity, which is a term borrowed from the Semitic group of languages, and it's a transliteration in Hebrew from likely the Akkadian, and is associated with an act of moloching, which means to sacrifice. Children and women were what was mostly offered to Moloch during the moloching, and hence this entity is associated with sacrificing children or innocents. It is a very complex practice that many scholars have discussed and debated for years with various interpretations. The one thing that can't be argued, however, is that these deities required the worst kinds of sacrifice, and its followers seem to be more than willing. The Hebrew Bible frequently condemns the worship of Baal, explicitly claiming that his followers and sometimes apostate Israelites sacrifice their children by fire to appease him. Classical Greek and Roman writers such as Plutarch, I know I said that wrong, I apologize, wrote that the Carthaginians sacrificed their young children to the chief god Baal-Hamon, particularly during times of crisis. And finally, excavations in North Africa have unearthed ancient burial urns containing the cremated remains of infants and young children near shrines dedicated to deities like Baal-Hamon. To add further confusion, both Baal and Moloch have been depicted as humanoid with the head of a bull or a ram, with outstretched arms. Yet when discussing places in secret societies like Bohemian Grove, Moloch is usually described as an owl due to the mock ritual called the cremation of care, where a child effigy is placed into the flames like with the ancient Baal or Moloch worship. Now, the owl is a very important symbol to occultism because it represents wisdom, knowledge, mystery, death, and even the shadow self. But it's never been represented or attached to Baal or Moloch historically. Instead, it's usually attached to the Greek owl of Athena. However, some esoteric and secret society traditions use the owl and Moloch in similar symbolic contexts, representing cycles of transformation, the shedding of ego, and the hidden architecture of power. But this is a complex amalgamation of distinct symbols. What I personally find creepy and unnerving is how in modern society all these so-called brilliant minds and billionaires claim to be atheist, yet they constantly force these ancient terms and imagery into every aspect of their work. We've even gotten to the point where the term moloching is used to refer a figurative system, institution, or collective action problem that demands extreme catastrophic sacrifices in exchange for survival, competitive success, or progress. The term is widely applied in modern philosophy and economics to phenomena like teenage social media addiction, multinational nuclear arms races, or the unchecked competitive rush to develop artificial intelligence, with one definition describing it as situations where individuals or groups make rational, self-interested choices that collectively lead to a destructive race to the bottom. As I've mentioned before with Bohemian Grove, the act of moloching has seemed to bleed from the ancient world into ours with various live mock performances or references in film. Some that quickly come to mind are the film Cabiria from 1914, Fritz Lang's Metropolis from 1927, the Romance of the People performance during the 1933 Chicago World's Fair, and even Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom from 1984, where the deity Moloch is pretty much replaced with the Hindu goddess Kali, but the ritual remains 100% the same. The poem Howl by Allen Ginsberg recontextualized Moloch as a symbol of industrial and post-industrial society, with many suggesting we simply replace the bronze idols with modern institutions and boardrooms. Today, human beings are constantly sacrificing for the beast. Whether it's time, ethics, or even innocence, all are consumed by the systems of corporate, economic, and political power. In the drop of Epstein files released this past winter, there were a number of damning emails, exchanges, and pictures, but one of the things that's constantly at the front of my mind is the email sent on July 27, 2009 from Jeffrey Epstein to William Doherty at JP Morgan. In the email, it says, quote, Please wire $11,438 to an account named Baal.name at the Wachovia Bank. When released, this email was supposedly debunked by journalists as an ORC misread, and that Baal was supposed to actually say bank, but was transposed into Baal during the scanning and digitizing of the financial records. I mean, sure, it could be a simple glitch like they say, but I don't know, it seems pretty sus and falls in a perfect line with the themes discussed in the poem Howl by Allen Ginsberg. Another thread in the emails that comes as shocking but not surprising, at least to me, are the supposed mentions of ritualistic cannibalism, such as the jerky emails and the yacht sacrifice report. To break it down simply, the jerky emails are a collection in the files where Jeffrey Epstein is constantly asking for and about beef jerky. The emails also discuss a personal chef preparing, shipping, and freezing large batches of jerky for Epstein's strict diet. After working for Epstein, this same chef then went on to open up a restaurant he named The Cannibal. While not definitive evidence of cannibalism, it doesn't help that some of the response emails regarding jerky have people saying things like, quote, "I'm going to go back to eating normal meat," end quote. Again, while not a definitive smoking gun, these emails raise the same red flags and alarms as the food-coded emails from Podesta and Clinton during the whole Pizzagate scandal, and I don't think it should be completely written off. The yacht sacrifice comes from a 2019 FBI report, which I'll read for you now. Heads up, this is extremely graphic and unsettling shit. If you need to take a minute or skip the video, I really don't blame you. So, 3, 2, 1, here we go. So just a heads up, there's a bunch of redacted bars in this report. So whenever I come up on one, I'll probably just say blank or something so you know that it's there. So the report starts off with 2 blanks and then says male Caucasian, 2 other massive blanks. And then, after being advised of the identity of the interviewing agent and task force officer as the nature of the interview, blank provided the following information, which is then followed by a massive redacted bar. And then it goes on to say, initial conversation and mannerism suggested some degree of possible mental illness or emotional instability, although blank was polite and well-mannered. The basis of this interview was predicated on an email sent to Office of the ADIC, FBI New York Field Office, Criminal Division by former FBI SA, blank blank, on July 12, 2019. The email referred to a request that the Bureau personnel contact an investigative journalist friend of blank, Michael Moore, and it says in brackets, not the film producer, via blank regarding an interview of a purported victim of Jeffrey Epstein. The author made phone contact with Moore, and an interview was scheduled at the C-20 office on Tuesday, August 27, 2019 for 12 p.m. Moore stated that the alleged victim, blank, was traveling via bus from Rhode Island to the New York field office. The author met with Moore and blank, and Moore stated that he would not be present during the scheduled interview. Then we move on to page 2, which starts off with a massive redaction bar, but once we, scroll down and get to the words, it starts by saying, blank stated that he first met Epstein at approximately age 4 while at the blank, East Greenwich, Rhode Island. Blank stated at the time he was raped by his great-uncle, blank, and that Epstein was present and did not touch him. Blank stated that after he was raped by his great-uncle, blank blank, Epstein then spoke with him, blank. Blank stated he did not know the identity of Epstein until some unspecified time in 2016. Blank further stated in sum and substance that while on a large luxury ship that sailed out of the Newport Boat Show in Newport, Rhode Island, September blank, at approximately 8 years of age, he, blank, was subjected to some type of medical exam about the yacht by an unknown doctor while his great-uncle, blank blank, and family member, blank blank, were present. Blank went on to describe a bizarre event in which blank blank inserted a tape measurer into his rectum. Blank stated, subsequent to the exam, that he was then raped, brackets sodomized, by Jeffrey Epstein, as well as former United States President William J. Clinton, while in a heavy drug-induced state. Blank also stated the bottom of his feet and back were slashed. Blank further stated also during the said yacht trip, multiple unknown male blacks were engaged in sex acts with unknown female whites, who had their backs slashed and were bleeding. Blank also described several infants being killed and their intestines removed, as well as other acts of cannibalism. Blank also stated that former United States President George H.W. Bush engaged in a sex act with an unknown male black. Former United States Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and businessman George Soros were present on the same yacht while all the aforementioned acts of violence were occurring. Blank was then asked if he had any injuries or scars as evidence, to which Blank responded, "On my anus." Blank was unable to provide any supporting or corroborating evidence or the identities of any witnesses to support his claim of victimization. Blank did provide a handwritten list of his family and extended family members, and it was not clear what investigative value, if any, the list had. Blank also stated that his great-uncle blank blank is in possession of video evidence of his crimes against blank, as well as several snuff films that blank had watched in the presence of his great-uncle blank blank. Now, along with this shocking report, there's also staggering accounts of Donald Trump's ties to this demonic network, despite his constant claims of not being involved, further proving this issue extends beyond left or right-wing ideology. The files show us that Trump was letting Epstein and Maxwell use the Mar-a-Lago as a sort of recruitment site for the sex trafficking ring, along with the multiple modeling agencies he owned and ran at the time. Another link to Trump were claims made by an Iraq war veteran named Sasha Riley. The story is brutal and emotionally exhausting, and there's a full interview with him that I recommend you watch if you have the chance. In the interview, Sasha claims that he was adopted and trafficked by his father, William Kyle Riley, and that from a young age he was forced to participate in child sex material, including witnessing the torture and murder of other children for snuff films. He's also claimed to be in one of these snuff films where a girl is shot in the face. He goes on to describe various locations where these predator parties were held, such as various ranches and farms across the United States, and he also talks about being forced to bare-knuckle box other kids to the death as these adults would feverishly watch and bet on them. Some prominent figures mentioned by Sasha are Donald Trump, Senator Lindsey Graham, Clarence Thomas, and Jim Jordan. Both Sasha and his advocate Lisa Noel Vold have attempted to provide information to the DOJ and FBI, but claim to have received no response or investigation into these leads. With the release of this interview and the reports surrounding it, many people went into a frenzy online trying to find more information and answers. Like many of the claims made in the past few months, there's been plenty of pushback and skepticism from mainstream media regarding Sasha's story, with reporters pointing to timeline inconsistencies as a major issue. I think the reason why I tend to believe Sasha's story is due to a couple reasons. The first being that there are no defamation reports that have been filed since these claims were made. The second is that there is a 2010 military report where a soldier was court-martialed for being in possession of child pornography containing Sasha. And the third, I guess you could call it a gut feeling, but when I first heard his story, I couldn't help but think of the interviews and claims made by Paul Bonacci during the Franklin cover-up and the disappearance of Johnny Gosch. A lot of the things Paul mentioned back in the 80s and 90s share an eerie parallel with the stories told by Sasha, and I don't know, I tend to believe victims. I'm not a piece of shit, I don't know. Sexual abuse and murder weren't the only forms of exploitation used by the cabal, though. They also attacked minds and wallets. Now, what I mean by this is, in some of the file drops, there has been revealed communications between Jeffrey Epstein and former Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick in 2012 and 2013. The emails discussed gaming strategies, edutainment, and utilizing virtual items for real-world rewards, with discussions allegedly centering around indoctrinating kids into an economy, with many believing that these tactics were used to get kids into gambling at an early age or to instill the idea of a common enemy and groom them into the future soldiers of tomorrow. Epstein aside, there's a whole rabbit hole regarding the three-letter agencies and their involvement in the creation of movies and video games that I recommend you dive into. The video game thing sounds crazy on the surface until you realize that it's basically an extension of the MKUltra program that's been going on since 1953, wherein various forms of mind control were conducted through the use of drugs, trauma, or even entertainment. The purpose is to create a nation of slaves who only care about consuming slop and buying what they're told to without ever questioning the system. A company that's deeply rooted in the MKUltra theory is Disney, mainly due to Walt's connection to the FBI, Freemasons, the use and teachings of occult mysticism in various cartoons, and the multiple instances of sexual innuendos and pedo symbols coded into children's entertainment. Like with the gaming industry and its ties to the military, Disney and Hollywood at large is a huge rabbit hole that has ties to national defense, exploitation, Satanism, and death that I recommend you guys take a closer look at. Seriously, if I wanted to do this on Hollywood, it would probably be a multi-hour video series, and I didn't have the energy for it today, but I promise one day I'll get a little further into it. Disney also connects to the Epstein files in a couple of ways, but the most damning and horrific revelation is that the Disney cruise lines would let families snorkel off the coast of Little St. James. All in all, the cabal has become a widespread issue that's reached its tentacles in almost every facet and part of the globe. The truly scary thing is that I'm watching all these theories I read about over a decade ago start to become more apparent and in my face as time goes on. The other thing that just straight up infuriates me is the amount of creators on this site who will make videos covering these subjects and then, fill it up with an insane amount of censorship, or worse, just constantly spamming a Patreon link for the full video. In my mind, these people are pretty fucked up because to an extent, they're also profiting off these horrible crimes. I mean, they make these videos with the intention of being paid and getting views, but not for spreading the message. I mean, I don't know, but to me, if they really cared about these issues, they would just demonetize these specific videos and just give the people all this information for free in the hopes that it spreads like wildfire. Putting up a kind of paywall adds an element of exclusivity, and it kind of just makes me think that a lot of these YouTubers only make these videos for the trend, quick likes, quick subscriptions, or any of that shit. It just doesn't seem genuine. It just seems like content for the sake of content. And it's really annoying because I do like watching some of these videos to, get more information because there's always new stuff coming out. But I find it like incredibly difficult to actually sit and pay attention to one of these videos when like every other word for like the whole 30-40 minutes is just like paused or blanked. And in some cases, it's words like, kidnapped or murdered, or even ages or names. Like, it's just really stupid shit getting censored. I mean, if you're in the know, you probably know who I'm talking about, but that their channel's gotten really bad for it, and it's gotten to a point where I honestly can't watch his videos anymore. Conspiracy files. But anyway, just a heads up to my viewers. I don't always make these videos, but when I do, I promise not to censor shit or capitalize off these stories. I just want to get the information out to you guys with no omissions or BS. I hope you found this video informative, and if you'd like me to dive into more of these subjects or theories, comment down below and I'll be sure to do some digging, and who knows, you might get a video made out of it. I hope you guys get a lot out of this. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace!